so it makes you look taller.
Well, yeah, I can't lean back because the back on this chair is a little bit splat.
Yeah.
So, good morning. We
Good
were both
afternoon,
sick.
good evening, and good night.
So, we're still a little bit sick. So, if there's some coughing, have to go off camera to blow a nose or something. Don't worry about that. It's all part of your unregularly scheduled programming.
Yeah,
We've been programmed. Did you know that? We're both robots. That's why it's programming.
You want to slide over a little so you're like actually in the picture? Okay, there. Alrighty. It has been a while.
It has been
between us
time,
being out of town and sick.
Wait, what is it? A times, and half a time.
Yeah, about that. About 3.5 weeks or so since we've. I think the last one we actually. Well, it's probably been 4 weeks since we had a prayer video up. The last one we did was not the prayer video. It was the World Religions one, which we also need to get back to getting one of those. So, as for today, though.
We're doing mentions of prayer in a book.
In the Bible.
The Bible is a book.
It is. And it does mention prayer.
It often.
Particularly within the Bible, we're going to narrow that down to 1 Samuel today,
because if we did all the mentions of prayer in the entire Bible at once, I would...
Well, so far it's taken us like 70-something videos, and we're up to 1 Samuel.
Well, I said mentions, not actual prayers.
Well, the actual prayers are also mentions.
That's fair. But...
so it would include everything. But anyway, so there are 5 mentions of prayer.
You can count.
The prayers, not very well, I said 4 at first. Where the prayer is not told. We don't know what they prayed, just that there were prayers. So the first of these in 1 Samuel, because we had finished all the prayers in 1 Samuel with the one of David.
I'll take your word for it.
Or David was asking if Saul was going to come down to Keilah, because we talked about providence and God lying and all those kinds of things, and that was fun.
Yeah, we had a cool discussion about that in class the other day, where God sent a false spirit into the prophet's mouths to tell Ahab to go up and die, and it's
fun stuff.
Well, did God lie, and is he capable of falsehood because he let this happen? Interesting discussions in class.
It is deep theology there when you get into that kind of stuff. Really things about the nature of God. All right, so the first of these, though, that we want to mention is 1 Samuel chapter 7, verses 7 through 9 is the whole thing. Really, verse 9 is what the focus is. But basically, this is... the Philistines are coming to fight against Israel, of course, as they always do.
And Israel's like, hey, Samuel, we're scared. Go pray for us.
Pray for us, yeah. I guess they're totally incapable of praying for themselves.
And Samuel's like, okay, I'm going to do that.
Yep, and so he does.
He does that. And we don't know what he says, but he does that.
Yeah, it just says, and Samuel cried out to the Lord for Israel.
I'm invisible.
You're not invisible. You're just out of the range of the camera.
And then the next one is in...
And the Lord answered him.
Oh, and that's the Lord, that is very important. We don't know what he said, as far as I know, because...
Don't know what either one of them said.
He just kind of chopped the verse off there,
well,
so he may have answered in verse 10, and I just don't know.
He doesn't. No,
he doesn't?
It just says, and the Lord answered him. That's
just
why I stopped
making sure.
But, I mean, by answered him there, so when we say God answered our prayer... we generally don't mean he spoke to us.
Fair.
What we mean is he did what we asked. And so I think that's probably actually... Samuel cried to the Lord for Israel. They were going out in this battle against the Philistines. And I think that's what's going on here is Samuel asked God to help him in the battle, and God did. That's how he answered. I don't think in this case it's a matter of God answering verbally. Although, I mean, obviously, there are a lot of times when he does, but this isn't one of those times. All right, you okay over there?
Yep.
All right, well, let's move on.
1 Samuel chapter 8 verses 4 through 9, specifically verse 6. So some things happen and Samuel's gotten old and his sons are just not
Scoundrels.
good people.
Yeah.
And
Bums.
so the other old people go up to Samuel and they're like, "Hey, you're old and you can't really do your job as well anymore, and your sons are
And
just
you're gonna die. I mean, and
evil
then what?
idiots. So, could you just, give us a king and establish a kingship? That way there's somebody always, taking care of us." And then verse 6 says, "But the thing displeased Samuel when they said, 'Give us a king to judge us.' And Samuel prayed to the Lord." And I'll go ahead and read the Lord's response. "And the Lord said to Samuel, 'Obey the voice of the people in all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me from being king over them. According to all the deeds that they have done from the day I brought them up out of Egypt, even to this day, forsaking me and serving other gods, so they are also doing to you. Now then, obey their voice. Only you shall solemnly warn them and show them the ways of the king who shall reign over them.'"
Yeah.
So
Rough.
that
Yeah.
happened.
God said basically, I was supposed to be their king, and I'm not good enough for them. They want a different king.
Yep.
And that's kind of sad, but typical of what we usually see happening in the Bible with people and God. So they reject God.
And outside of the Bible.
Yes, absolutely. So, okay. And of course, Samuel goes on and he does that and he warns them. And that brings down to 1 Samuel chapter 12 after they've gone about this for another 3 chapters.
More things
and
happened.
Things have happened and more about the king and so forth. And they finally are getting a king in chapter 12. And he says, look, God's going to do something today. And it's the wheat harvest today.
Uh-oh.
And so the wheat harvest is supposed to be the dry time of the year, I suppose, is the idea here. But I will call upon the Lord, so there's a mention of prayer there in verse 17, that he may send thunder and rain, and you shall know and see that your wickedness is great, which you have done in the sight of the Lord, in asking for yourselves a king. So, verse 18 says, Samuel called upon the Lord, and the Lord sent thunder and rain that day, and all the people greatly feared the Lord and Samuel. And they said, pray for your servants to the Lord your God, that we may not die, for we have added to all our sins this evil to ask for ourselves a king. And we assume that Samuel did pray for them. It does not say.
Mm-hmm.
But then he goes on and says, hey, it's going to be okay. You're going to get your king like you wanted. Lucky you.
So,
but, of course, he, again, has told them what that king's going to be and what that king's going to do. And king's going to kidnap your kids and make them serve him. He's going to send your sons off to battle. And he's going to steal your daughters to be his wives and all that kind of stuff. And, yeah, you're getting what you asked for. He's going to tax you to death. Yes, government is great.
Oh, government is just the best always. So those are all prayers that happened, and we have another one in 1 Samuel chapter 15, verse 11. God says, "Hey, I'm really sad that I made Saul king, and he has turned away from me and isn't doing what's right." And Samuel was angry, and he cried to the Lord all night. Now you want to think about that.
Yeah,
He
and
was
you wonder
praying
here,
all night long. That's
was
crazy.
that one long prayer, or like Jesus? Jesus in the garden, he goes and he prays, and then he comes back and he goes back and prays again the same thing, and goes back and prays again. So is he just like praying the same thing over and over all night long, or was this like an entire biography of all the things from the beginning of his life on? I mean, all the things that just had bothered him all along the way. I mean, I would imagine Samuel could probably have
It reminds
cried
me
to God for a long time.
I know you haven't seen it, but in Hamilton, there's a section where Hamilton and I just forgot who it is. Not Jefferson. Burr. Hamilton and Burr are
Shoot each other.
No, they're arguing.
They comes first. Then they
yeah,
shoot
that
each other.
comes first. And Burr says something about, tell me about all the things about me that you don't like or whatever. And Hamilton's like, here's an itemized list of 30 years worth of grievances.
Yeah. I can imagine. I mean, obviously, he wrote all this book of the Bible and everything to record all these things that happened. But I can imagine him on the side having another list. Today, this happened, and yeah, I could imagine him making a list of grievances like that. But yeah, he cries out, and this is the thing. This is the section where you're probably familiar. Right after this, what happens? After he cries to the Lord all night, then he goes to where Saul is. And if you remember, this is the time Saul was supposed to go and kill an enemy and destroy everything that breathed, people and animals and everything. He saved the king alive, and he brought animals back. And Samuel shows up then after this night of, because God told him, Saul didn't do what I told him to do. Mm-hmm. And so he shows up then, and Saul's like, look, I did what God said. And Samuel's like,
why do I hear things?
I'm hearing sheep and cows, and I shouldn't be hearing that if you killed everything that breathed. And look, here's the king of the people that you were supposed to kill.
Ooh.
And so Samuel chops off the king's head, and
the not Israel king.
Yeah. Boy, it would have sped things along if he'd have done the other. But yeah, that's so. Yeah, and that was when God turned away from Saul at that point, and just that was kind of the end of it. And he said, I'm going to get a different king to have. But it's interesting, and probably you remember one of the most famous sayings, certainly of Samuel, and one of the most common of the Old Testament, really, is.
Obedience is better than sacrifice.
Right. Yeah, obedience is better than sacrifice. God would rather have you do what he said than disobey him and bring him sacrifices to offer as a way of saying, oops, sorry, we didn't do what you said. Here you go.
So the last one that we're going to look at is actually after Samuel's already dead. 1 Samuel chapter 28, verses 5 through 7, specifically 6 and 7. So Saul sees this big army of Philistines, and he's like, oh no.
The good news is this is the last time Saul will see a big army of Philistines.
That's fair.
Yeah.
Well,
in life.
That's the last army of Philistines he's going to see. He sees them several times.
Yeah, but this is the last, the last time that he faces an army of Philistines.
So, verse 6, and when Saul inquired of the Lord did not answer him. So I know we've had some before, but I feel like that's one of the first ones in a while where God just didn't answer.
Yeah, he's
Here's the extent of God's not answering. Mm-hmm. God didn't answer him either by dreams or by Urim. That was a special way they could I assume.
Yeah, we are really unsure about how the Urim and Thummim things work.
It was a way to communicate with God.
Yeah,
I'm not entirely sure how.
I think it may have been something like a casting of lots.
Yeah,
should I go? Let me flip this coin. Heads I go, tails I don't. Kind of thing.
Yeah,
but we really don't know much about them because they were completely lost.
And the Lord did not answer by his prophets. So that's three fairly
God
common
wouldn't answer
ways.
him. He wouldn't give him a dream. He wouldn't answer when he cast the lots. Basically, he wouldn't answer. He wouldn't send him a prophet to tell him what to do. Of course, because Samuel's dead. But
so Saul's just totally at a loss here,
and so he does as he always did, exactly the wrong thing.
It was perfect.
It's like, God won't answer me, so let me go ask the devil. I mean, kind of an exaggeration, but basically, yeah.
So Saul said to his servants, hey, find me a woman who's a medium that I can go ask her.
Yeah. So he goes to a woman who is...
went to the witch doctor and said, what do I do?
Yeah, it is interesting that it's a woman. Did they not have any men who were mediums? It's just seek out a woman. But it's and it's odd because Samuel had Saul had outlawed mediums.
Uh-huh.
He had said nobody's supposed to use these people, and then
And
he's
so-
like, "Find one for me. I really need to talk to the devil."
And so when he goes and talks to her and she finds out, hey, this is Saul, she's like, oh no, hang
You're
on,
gonna kill me, yeah.
I'm not. You said I'm not supposed to be doing this. So what's going on here? But
Well, at first she's just like, Saul said no witches, and he's like, well, I promise you
No
nothing bad's gonna
witches.
happen to you. And then, she calls for Samuel to come up from the dead, which
he does.
and she screams, and she is like, whoa, what just happened here?
Very
Because
scary.
I've never actually been able to do this before. I'm a fake. Yeah, she calls Samuel up, and he appears, and then she recognizes Samuel, and she's like, if that's Samuel, then that's Saul, and oh no, you tricked me, and but that really he wasn't trying to trick her. He was just that bad off. And then Samuel says, this is the last army of Philistines you'll have to face.
Yeah.
You gonna die.
Yep.
You come see me, and then we can talk. No more calling me up from the grave. I was resting,
Does,
and you bothering me.
Samuel actually say you're gonna come see me?
No, he just says you and your sons are gonna die, basically.
Huh.
You're all gonna be in the grave. But yeah, so those are all, quite a range there, from God answering prayers to God not answering prayers. People asking, pray for us, to somebody who decided to go to a witch to get pray.
Yep.
Instead of praying for me, call up dead people for me to talk to.
Wide variety.
But 1 Samuel is a book full of variety.
The Bible's a book full of variety.
Yes. And next time we will get into 2 Samuel and see what that leads to.
Yep.
So,
Adios.
goodbye.
See you next time.